recording. Will you just double check that in your top corner it says you're recording at 1080?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Off you go.
Oh, now I'm trying to get back to the original screen. I lost you.
Sorry, Josh.
Sorry, Josh. I mean, let's be honest. Homeboy doesn't have to really edit too much. I can't imagine.
No.
Maybe more than I realize. He's probably like, yeah, right, buddy. You wish.
It's like, you know how many times you clear your throat in a damn episode?
That's the truth. I can't imagine him trying to take all those out. Not a chance. All right. Ready? Let's rock and roll.
Yep. Go ahead.
Episode 49. What happens to your team when pressure goes up? In normal conditions, most teams can operate fairly effectively. We're meeting goals, we're collaborating well enough, we're solving problems. There's a reasonable level of trust in the room. People feel comfortable contributing, work moves on. It may not be exceptional at all times, but things seem to be working, and then something changes. Bom, 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 bom. Maybe revenue came in under what is expected for the quarter. Maybe a key client relationship feels strained. I was just talking to one of our clients yesterday about that exact situation. Maybe there have been significant shifts on the team, and you're learning how to move forward without some of the people who once carried significant weight. And this is where the challenges begin. When pressure increases, that's the moment you need your people to elevate. You need intensity to rise. You need focus to sharpen. You need your strongest leaders to step forward. And often when what you experience is the opposite. Energy seems to shrink instead of expand. People become more careful instead of more creative. Communication diminishes and decisions slow down when clarity is needed most. You don't necessarily see open dysfunction, but you can feel that the team is not responding to pressure the way you hoped it would. And that's when leaders start asking a very hard question. I know I've asked it before myself. Is this team built for the level of pressure required to get where we're going? And Dawn, you and I say this to our clients all the time. We don't really know who we are as leaders until you put us under increasing and ongoing pressure.
That's right. What do they say? The squeeze reveals the juice, right?
Woo! Isn't there like a rap song about that? Never mind. I shouldn't go there. not for this podcast.
The thing is, as leaders, we feel like when in normal circumstances, we are training for the moments of pressure on our team.
Yeah.
And so when that pressure comes, we're like, okay, guys, we've been working for this. We're ready. You know what to do. And so it feels really frustrating. It really grabs our attention as leaders when we don't experience that.
Yeah.
When we kind of sit back and go, that's not how I expected that to go. And we tend to see that response when stakes go up, and it makes us wonder what it says about us and our team. And that feels, as leaders, it can feel super uncomfortable. Because we spend a lot of time and energy and effort, blood, sweat, and tears building teams, casting visions, setting expectations. And in stable seasons, it really feels like it's working. You look around and you're like, okay, we got this.
Yeah.
We're in a good place. But pressure has a way of stripping away that margin, just like you were saying. And when that happens, we're not evaluating our culture, our teams in theory anymore. That's often what we're doing in comfortable seasons is we're testing things in theory. Now we are behaving. When pressure goes up, we're seeing how our teams behave under increased weight, increased tension. So I think the real issue that leaders feel in that moment isn't just frustration. It's not just the frustration of why isn't my team responding the way I wished it would. It feels a little bit like exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a leader, I haven't done enough to prepare my team. And now I'm out here on a limb all by myself. So help us with that, Eric. If pressure rises and our team shrinks back instead of expanding into the moment, instead of charging forward into the moment, Help us understand what's happening inside our team.
Yeah, well, let me throw this out to begin with, just to kind of set a mental framework for our listeners. I think we need to remember there's a difference between skill and capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So I've shared this story before, but I'm going to spin it in a new direction today. As a collegiate athlete, we spent hours every day developing the particular skills so that we could perform in our positions on the soccer field. That was my sport. But then at the end of practice, our coach would make us run wind sprints. And I've talked about this, about the recovery rate and stuff before, but part of that was because he understood that we needed to be able to perform the skills we already knew how to do, but when we were exhausted, tired, spent at the end of our limit. And I think that's what we're talking about. So I think sometimes as leaders, when we're talking about being under pressure, we think, and we're folding, we're struggling, people aren't performing. I think that the temptation is to think, oh, I don't have those skills. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that is the case, but very often it's not that we're lacking the necessary leadership skills. We're lacking the necessary leadership capacity. In other words, our ability to perform those skills under increasing pressure. As a matter of fact, even with our own clients, we spend, a good deal of time training them in these particular leadership tools, these skills, these basic leadership skill sets that guarantee that they will know how to operate well in virtually any circumstance. Mm-hmm. However, we continue to work with these leaders and teams well beyond the training of the tools, because what we want to do is we want to see how they perform with these skills under pressure, because it's when we're under pressure that, just like in athletics, the oxygen is running low, and we become we start getting hasty, we become impatient, we lose our focus. Again, it doesn't mean we don't have skill. It just means that our capacity is being tested. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of what we're kind of getting after today.
Good.
So when pressure rises, perceived risk also rises. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the more responsibility we have, the more pressure that comes on us, the more we feel like is at stake, the more we feel the fear of loss, of mm-hmm. failure.
Yeah.
And when those perceived risks start to escalate, our behaviors begin to change to accommodate for that fear and that insecurity, right? Mm-hmm. So when things are going well, teams will speak candidly with one another because that feels safe, right? Taking initiative, taking risks feels safe. Offering disagreement in the midst of conversation, right? It doesn't feel overly costly. But when the stakes go up, the cost of being wrong suddenly feels insurmountable.
Yeah.
The fear of exposure feels greater, right? The cost of conflict suddenly feels much higher. And so people recalibrate in order to mitigate against that perceived risk or risk of exposure. Yeah. Right. And so when that happens, it's just natural human tendency. It's the fight or flight syndrome.
That's right.
Right. We talk about this a lot, is that when we feel threatened, when we're under pressure, oftentimes that will start to trigger the amygdala, that little almond-sized part of our brain that alerts us to a threat.
Yep.
Right. And so what do? We start trying to accommodate and to mitigate against unnecessary, what feels to us is unnecessary risk. And so our initiative diminishes, our decisions start to slow down. And what we very often see is that team partnership wanes. And it is in order to avoid the risk of, I don't want other people to see that I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't understand the problem, or I'm struggling in a particular area. And I think we need to understand that what's being tested under pressure isn't our intelligence. It's not necessarily our skills or our determination or our commitment to the team or to the company or to the mission. But it's our ability under pressure, our capacity to work well individually and collectively, especially when it comes to trust and collaboration.
That's so good. That kind of juxtaposition between skill and capacity makes me think of, we just wrapped up the Winter Olympics, And you get to see this play out in real time with individuals who have spent their lives building a skill,
Yeah.
right? I think pretty famously, we had an American ice skater who was expected to win gold, and yet he'd never performed at such a high level before. He'd never been to the Olympics, which is, obviously the highest stage that he could perform on. And even though his skill was top notch, his capacity to perform under that increased pressure,
Yeah.
it hadn't been built enough. It hadn't been tested enough. And he didn't perform up to expectations. And when we experience that on our teams, I can imagine his coach being like, what happened?
Yeah.
We trained for this. You knew what to do. We talked about the pressure of the Olympics. We talked about what this was going to feel like. However, no amount of talking about something, no amount of drills or practice actually prepares us for what that fight or flight feeling does in real time when we feel threatened, when the pressure actually increases.
Yeah.
And as leaders, our instinct can be to push harder in those moments. You know how to do this. You've done things just like this before. Why does this feel so hard? Why are you stalling? Why are you pulling back? But if the perceived risk has increased, as we're describing here, as leaders, adding more pressure into the system without creating more trust actually makes the problem worse. Now we're just doubling down on the pressure when we as leaders come in with more pressure in these situations. So what have you seen? What actually determines, in your opinion, whether teams are able to stay open and collaborative and kind of fighting for something together in these seasons versus teams that shrink back and withdraw when pressure rises?
Yeah. Okay, so now let's connect some dots. So we're talking about what happens under pressure. The perceived risk increases. And then you brought in the concept of trust.
Yeah.
And so just for a second, I want to connect those dots for our listeners. And then we'll unpack this. Because people would say, well, what does trust have to do with it? Right? If the amygdala in our brain is firing, we feel threatened. We're at risk of losing something or failing or being exposed. That is a threat, which will cause us to constrict, to become conservative, to shrink back, to play it safe, to avoid the fear of what could happen. So the role that trust plays, and I'm going to kind of layer this, both trust with ourselves internally and trust within the group of people that we're operating with.
Yeah.
The role that trust plays is that an environment in where we feel trust, that equals a feeling of safety and security. If I feel trust between you and I feel safe and secure. And to the degree I feel trust, that I can trust you and you can trust me. And we'll unpack what we mean by trust in just a hot second. But it means that we will naturally feel more safe and secure, which then allows us to relax, which then releases more of our energy focus potential. The less safe and secure we feel, the more we constrict, the more we manage, the more we mitigate, the more we shrink back. So I want our listeners to hear this because it's an important connection that we got to make in our own minds. What's interesting, you were talking about the Olympics. As an avid golfer, I'm constantly paying attention. I watch tons of interviews and videos online, and I love to hear from world-renowned golf coaches about how they work with professional athletes. And the other day at my own club, we have one of those coaches who is that's his home base. And I was asking him, I said, hey, I want to understand from your perspective, what's the difference? There are so many people trying to operate become
Yeah.
professional golfers, but there's a very small number of people that you ever hear about on the TV channel, right? And he said, Eric, the difference of skill between the top 5 players in the world and the top 500 players in the world, he said he would even push it to like 1,000 players in the world, top 1,000. He said the difference of skill is almost indistinguishable.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
That's crazy.
He said the difference is their ability to operate well under pressure.
That is crazy. What?
I know. I was like, oh my, I said, what about for someone like me who's like maybe in the top 10 million of the world? What does that mean? He's like, maybe there's a bit of a skill gap there, but it just goes to show you that oftentimes we don't realize that what's holding us and our teams back is not a skill issue. It's not an intelligence issue. It's a capacity, an ability to operate well under pressure. And being able to operate well under pressure requires that we create environments that feel safe and secure, right? Rather than feeling threatened and fearful and insecure. Another way I like to talk about it is when we feel safe and secure, we feel free to operate from a position of faith. Now, for my listeners, we're not talking about a religious view of faith. We're talking about, though I do think it's tied into spirituality, I think all human beings are faith-driven creatures. In other words, let me offer a simple definition of faith. Faith is a conviction of something that we don't yet see. Mm-hmm. So I have faith that when I get in my car at the end of the workday today, I'm going to be able to drive and navigate my way home.
Yeah.
Now, I've done it before, but I have faith in something I've not yet experienced. I have not yet today driven home. Now, let's expand that. I have faith, a conviction that when I get onto a plane, even for the very first time, that it's going to fly through the air, a hunk of metal at hundreds of miles an hour and arrive safely in another city, right? It's a conviction of something I can't yet see. When we started this business, it required faith. Everything that we're fighting for, every vision that we have requires faith to say, I believe that we can achieve that. It's something that we've not yet seen or experienced. We're all faith-driven creatures. When you get married, you have faith that relationship. When you have kids, you have faith that baby's going to come to full term and that you're going to have a family. You need faith to increase your financial resources. We are people driven and who operate best when we're operating from faith. The opposite of that is fear. And that's what we're talking about. Under pressure, what gets squeezed out is our function of faith. And then what replaces it is fear. And fear is what causes us to shrink back. Faith is what causes us to expand. But in an environment that feels insecure and unsafe, then we're going to operate out of fear. Yeah. In an environment where we feel secure and safe, we're going to operate out of faith. And for any of us really wondering how this works, just go back to your childhood. When you felt safe and secure, you expanded, you explored, you were adventurous, you tried new things, you risked and you learned and you expanded. And when you were operating in an environment that felt insecure, unsafe, then you probably operated out of fear. You withdrew, you hid, you diminished, you shrunk back. It's really important. This conversation for me, working with leaders, is kind of one of those where once we understand that, then we get to identify which one are we operating out of, and then we get to choose.
That's right. Which
one we want to operate out of. But as leaders, coming back to our conversation, I hope that was a worthwhile kind of side note.
I think it was.
Rabbit trail, but it was worth it. To come back to this, as leaders, our responsibility then, if we want the best out of our team, especially under increasing pressure, then we have to learn how to create environments that feel safe and secure for them.
Yeah.
Again, safe and secure does not mean, hey, you never get challenged. Doesn't mean, hey, we throw your failures under the rug. We don't talk about that. We don't handle conflict. No, none of that. Safe and secure can be best understood through one of our leadership tools called the trust code. And the trust code basically reminds us that as human beings, to accomplish anything in life, we're going to have to partner with other human beings, right? In our significant relationships, in families, in business, in politics, and social stuff. It doesn't matter if you go to the grocery store, you're going to have to partner with the person across the counter to check your groceries out. You're going to have to partner with people on the freeway to get where you're going. Partnership is required to do anything worthwhile in life. And to partner with other people, right, we're looking for that connection. We're looking for that kind of partnership. But we also have to remember as human beings that we have over and over through our life experienced the pain of having that trust broken.
Yep.
That maybe through our parents at a young age, our siblings, extended family members, friends in middle school who told our secret to other people, to the coach who mishandles us on, in our sporting event, to the boyfriend or girlfriend who broke up with us and we thought we were in love and we're going to get married, whatever the case is, a boss who fired us, unexpectedly, and lots of examples. We've all experienced these moments. We have so many data points where we have sought to partner with another human being in a special way, only to have that trust broken.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? To partner with other people means we have to take a risk. And the only way to genuinely mitigate against that risk is not to just simply increase your skill. Mm-hmm. It's to increase our capacity for trust. So if you imagine a diagram where there are two people wanting to partner together, but between them lies this massive chasm that we label risk, then the only way to support that partnership in the face of that ongoing risk is to build trust, right? So think of trust as a bridge that covers that chasm, that requires both parties to build from their own side. And it is the strength of that bridge that determines the weight, the pressure that partnership can operate under.
Yep.
This is why in our marriages, we exchange vows, or it's essentially a contract, right? Because we identify the risk of this partnership is we're going to build a life together. And if it suddenly blows up in our face, that's a massive risk. Mm-hmm. And so we exchange these vows to honor that risk and to say, hey, if we're going to partner together, we've got to build trust. And I would suggest, just for our listeners, that the vast majority of marriages that I have seen fall apart over the years, including my own that has been under incredible duress at different seasons, almost always boils down to, do we know how to build trust with one another? Yeah. Do we know how to? It's not about success or failure, money or not money. That's why the marriage vows are for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, for sickness, for health, till death do us part, right? We're talking about all the things that we think matter most. But the reality is that bridge it has to be based on trust. And the way we would define trust is very simple. We build trust with other human beings by engaging them and communicating toward them in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, and valued. I believe that every human being has a fundamental need to feel seen, heard, and valued. Now, we're not going to go super deep into what we mean by seen, heard, and valued. Our listeners can go back to some of our earlier episodes in season 1 where we unpack this tool in greater depth. We have resources online for them. We have books on this. We have tons of stuff out there to really unpack this. But it's super important to understand that trust is built between two parties to the degree that there is a reciprocal expression of, I see you, I hear you, I value you. It doesn't mean we always agree. It doesn't mean we see the world the same way. It doesn't mean we have the same political views. It doesn't mean we have the same religious beliefs. It doesn't mean that we want to raise our kids exactly the same way. It doesn't mean we don't want to live in the same city. It doesn't mean any of those things. But what it does mean is, I see you, I hear you, I value you. And what that does for a human being is create the environment of safety and security that allows that human being to more easily operate from a posture of faith.
Mm-hmm.
so that they can expand and step into the pressures and difficulties of life with far greater courage than if they were operating out of fear.
Yeah, that's good. And I want to just double click on something for our listeners, in that the what you will be able to accomplish in any partnership is dependent upon how strong the bridge of trust you've built, right? And
Mhm.
some relationships, some partnerships don't require that much trust. If I do a mobile order for Starbucks, I'm trusting that they're going to deliver my drink correctly, but the stakes aren't super high. So the bridge of trust doesn't have to be super strong to
Well,
support.
maybe not for you, Don, but I've seen some people literally lose their shit
Well,
in a
that
Starbucks when their order was done wrong. And I'll tell you why. It's probably because in other areas of their life, right, they're not feeling seen, heard, and valued. And Starbucks, with no intentionality, got their drink wrong. But what
yeah,
did they feel in that moment? You
triggered
don't
them
see me, you don't hear me, and you don't value me enough to get
to
my
do it
drink order
right.
right.
That's right. Well, that's a whole other conversation about
That
composure
is,
that we
that
can
is.
talk about at another time. But um, there different partnerships in our life require different levels of trust,
Yes.
different amounts of pressure.
Yes.
That weight has to bear more, or that bridge has to bear more weight, right? So you think of different bridges. I am for sure no engineer, but I've been on a variety of different bridges, and some are little rickety bridges that a car can barely drive across, and it's wooden, and it's just crossing a small span, and you just have to trust that it's going to get you from one side to the other. And then you look at things like the Golden Gate Bridge, which
Yeah.
transports probably thousands of people daily and hundreds
Mhm.
of people at one time.
Yeah.
The weight that that bridge has to bear is significant, and the span that it's crossing is significant. And the same is true when we look at what we are trying to accomplish with different people, whether that's, as you said, a significant other, whether that's our families, whether that's our team. What is the weight that we are asking that partnership to bear?
Mhm.
And how far are we asking people to extend themselves over that chasm of risk?
Mm.
That should be the indicator
Yeah.
of how much effort, time, intentionality that you have put in to investing in that trust
Yeah, it's so
between
good.
you and that other person.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
So when we are feeling frustrated that our teams aren't performing when pressure goes up, the question isn't why aren't they stepping up? The question is, interesting that this is an indicator, a place of curiosity for us as leaders. It would appear that my team doesn't feel safe enough to take this risk. It would appear that we haven't built enough trust to sustain the increased pressure that we are now operating under. So now we get to get curious. Okay, how can we invest in intentionally strengthening that bridge so that this season of pressure, this season of increased risk feels safe, feels
Yeah.
tolerable.
Yeah. I
Um,
love that. I
yeah.
love that. Let me just pause this just for a second, because I know we're going to jump in and share some real life examples that maybe help illustrate what we're talking about. I just want to pause here. I mean, we could do a whole nother, maybe we do need to do a whole nother episode on what I'm about to share, but I
Okay.
mentioned it earlier. I want to come back to it. I want our listeners to understand that building trust with others is critical as we talk about partnership with other people. But I think for us as leaders, we often say we can only lead others to the degree that we can lead ourselves.
Mhm.
And part of leading ourselves is building a culture of trust internally within ourselves.
Yeah.
So, just for a moment, because some of our listeners are going to need to reflect on this afterward, we can ask those same questions of ourselves. Do I regularly practice seeing myself, paying attention to myself? We call it self-awareness. Am I aware of my mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial, whatever kind of, season of life? Am I paying attention to myself? Do I hear myself? Am I aware of the thoughts and the feelings and the wants and the needs and the passions and the desires and the fears and the insecurities and the motivations and all those things? So am I hearing what's coming out of me, what's going on inside of me? And do I value myself? In other words, am I putting my money where my mouth is? Right? If I really value my sleep, am I setting the right boundaries so I can get right sleep? If I really value my physical body, am I setting the boundary? I mean, I just talked to a client the other day who said, I don't have time to work out. And I just was like, BS. That's not true. Mm-hmm. You may choose not to make time to work out, but you have time to work out. You're just spending it on other things. Oh, you don't understand. I can't leave the office. I'm like, you own the company, bro. You can leave the office whenever the hell you need to. I'm not saying you should leave it whenever you want to, but I'm saying do we practice seeing, hearing, and valuing ourselves? Because if we're not doing that, it's going to be incredibly difficult to do that for others.
That's a great point.
All right. Should we tell some stories?
Let's do it.
Let's tell stories. I love stories. Right? Because this is where the rubber hits the road. We've already shared lots of little fun examples from our own lives. I want to share, as we were preparing for this recording, I couldn't help this memory of working with, this was a professional sports organization. This was, just a couple of years, 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember somebody who had been promoted into the senior leadership role over this organization came to me and said, hey, I really need your help. I'm inheriting an environment that is really struggling to perform at a higher level. Mm-hmm. And so, I went in and we did a huge, assessment just to kind of understand what's going on. And what we discovered was that it was an organization that was very siloed and fragmented. People were isolated, operating kind of on their own. We also discovered that people equated failure with the fear of losing their job. So not a risk-taking culture.
No.
Which then robs all creativity. And people hid. People did not want to be exposed, did not want others to know what they were up to or what they were doing. This is a high level, high functioning professional sports organization that on the inside is withering away. And what we also discovered is that the vast majority of the people in their individual roles and responsibilities were highly skilled.
Yeah.
But as an organization, as a team, they were unable to work well together, and especially work well together under increased pressure. It's almost like any pressure pushed people further into isolation. Mm-hmm. And so partnering with this particular leader, began to invest into the individuals and to the team itself, the principles and practices of what we call the trust code, like how help them understand if we want to be a higher performing team and organization, if we want to achieve greater things. Number one, we have to recognize that we can only do this together. Number two, we're going to have to create an environment, a culture, a way of operating that allows us to risk the pain of exposure and failure and all of the things that insecurity drives within us. And we're going to have to become an environment of and a people who operate more out of faith and fear.
Yeah. And
it took a while. I would say it was probably 3 to 6 months before I started seeing any significant traction, starting, as we say, the needle started moving. But it was amazing. Like in the beginning, it was just people sharing ideas at a meeting that would never have opened their mouth. And then it became people partnering together offline with each other to help each other. succeed in their own areas of responsibility. But then it became people sharing meals together so that they could continue the conversations that were going. And then it began, and it would just continue to escalate. And it took probably 6 months before I started to see anything happen. And then it was like the floodgates opened. And within 9 to 12 months, it was unbelievable. The tipping point, we hit the tipping point, and they became a highly collaborative, high risk taking, highly creative team that was far outperforming where they were even a year before, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And increased trust made that possible. Yeah, that's incredible. So I want to share a story from my personal archives where rewinding the tape back about 10 years, I experienced a season of kind of repeat significant breaches of trust and significant partnerships, specifically around my job,
Mm-hmm.
And it was with a variety of different organizations. What that looked in the specifics were, different in each scenario, but what was internalized for me was the same thing, which is it is not safe to trust my livelihood, my creativity, my professional journey to anyone.
Yeah.
And so what followed was a season of significant contraction, in a sense, where I pulled back any bridges that really were out of my control.
Yeah, like a drawbridge. You're like, boop, boop, boop,
Yeah.
boop, boop,
Yep.
no, thank you.
Exactly. Those bridges are just lifting those puppies up. Because I did not want to put myself in a position where I was bearing too much risk when it came to I have to, pay my mortgage. I have to put food on the table for my families, and I cannot partner with people who are at first seemed trustworthy, but through time broke my trust.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to be in charge of this. The bridge is me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
And I would partner with clients, right? But I maintain very tight control of that. We have contracts. They delineate how we are going to engage, what that working relationship is going to look like. I maintained very tight control. And when I think of it now, it was definitely a season of intense contraction, business wise, lots of success, financially, lots of success, but relationally, and then even being able to get myself to the next level, I reached my capacity very quickly because I wasn't willing to trust anybody with that level of risk that I had done previously. And then enter our relationship, Eric, which we have been working together, 5 years now.
Really? 5?
I think so.
Okay. I trust you. I'm terrible with time.
4 or 5.
Okay.
And it started slow,
Yeah.
right? It started small. And over time of building trust and seeing how you and I both operate. And in that time, you and I even experienced, not with each other, but with other people, more breaches of trust, right?
Yeah.
That made the risk of our partnership too great, and what happened is that over time, though, we were able to build a bridge that sustains the level of partnership that we have now. That I like looking back, even 2 years ago, I don't think either of us would have thought that we would be partnering as closely in the business as we are now.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just throw just a couple of thoughts from my vantage point. I also think over the last few years, however many it's been, you don't build this kind of trust overnight,
No.
right? Even I've been married to Candy now for will be 25 years this year, and you don't step into marriage with the kind of strength of a bridge that you're going to need 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years
Right.
from now. But
Hmm.
the goal is to build that bridge, to learn how to build it, and then the bridge has to be tested,
That's right.
right? Because I'm sure for you and I both, we've broken each other's trust in small ways along the way. And
Sure.
okay, can we repair the bridge? Is it worth staying on this bridge? Okay, let's strengthen this bridge. And that's happened multiple times. We've shared that in this podcast, right? Where we've had these kind of points of conflict or tension or disagreement or frustration with one another. And we've had to practice what we preach, and we've had to work through those things and utilize our own toolkit
Right.
to get to the other side.
That's right.
To the point where, even, as recent as what, maybe 8, 9 months ago,
Mhm.
I finally came to you and said, "Hey, you're amazing. I want you all in on this. Let's go. Let's go build something bigger together than we could individually." And you were
Right.
like, "Well, that's a huge risk." Because now here I am again, entrusting
Yeah.
areas of your family's life to
Uh-huh.
this business and into this relationship or this partnership, which I deeply appreciate. But it's interesting, Don. I tell people there's one of a few ways we can do life.
Yeah.
We can choose the hermit life, right? I'm the
Yeah.
lone wolf. I'll do it all on my own. Even if we have relationships, we're really doing everything on our own. We can choose what I call the kind of the boss life, which is I'm your boss, do what I tell you. You're just employees. You're just, you are expendable, and I can sub you out for somebody else any second and just do what I need you to do. That's also a kind of lone wolf, but it's like, oh, now I need some, I'm the genius with 1,000 minions, kind of approach. Or there's what I call the tribal approach, which is recognizing that through all of human history, um, we as people have accomplished all of the greatest feats of humanity, in community, in tribes, in groups. Um, sometimes those groups have been, lots of family integrated in. Sometimes these are friends like family. But what's clear is they are human beings who have a shared mission and who learn how to build those bridges of trust to sustain them when the shit's hitting the fan, when things aren't going well, that allows them to persevere, to get the breakthroughs and achieve greater things together than they could have by themselves. And I think that's a good reminder for myself, for us, and for our listeners. That's what we're fighting for.
That's right.
Right. And that's marriage, that's family, that's business, that's government, that's everything that we
Life.
care about in the world.
Hmm.
Requires that we choose one of those three pathways. And the third pathway is definitely the riskiest, it will come with the most heartache, frustration, and pain, but it's also by far the most rewarding.
Yeah, it's true. And being on this side of it, I'm shocked that we have been able to build a bridge strong enough, just knowing both of our backgrounds, that we've been able to build
Yeah.
a bridge strong enough that 8 months ago it was like, okay, let's go all in on this together.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
It's true.
Yeah. And I can say that I have experienced a lot of heartache over the last probably 6 years.
Hmm.
I would say I've experienced more heartache and pain through an experience of what I would interpret as people breaking my trust.
Yeah.
Um, but let's be honest, it takes two to tango. So I'm sure I played my
Yeah. Yeah.
my fair part in some of those dynamics and the breaking of those relationships. However, what I can say is in my earliest years, I was almost always the perpetrator. I was almost always the person who chose the lone wolf lifestyle, surrounded by a sea of friends, but internally operated as the lone wolf because of my deep fear of being hurt. And so I was the one who would hurt people first, reject people first, abandon people first. I would be the one who left. I'd be the one who went on my own. And then grew through that and came to the realization of, oh my gosh, my life is going to really be stunted and limited if I continue to operate. So I learned this other way, this tribal way of operating, which came with its own journey, a lot of heartache and pain and frustration. But the reward that I experienced on that journey, to me today, means that the rest of my life, I will fight for that.
Yeah.
Even though I won't always do it perfectly, and there will always be people who operate in a way that breaks trust and burns those bridges, I feel like I can no longer entertain another path. Yeah. Even if it's the one that feels safer in the moment, even if it's the one that feels easier, the one that feels less ridden with hardship and heartache, I'm just, to my deepest core now, committed to fighting for this, and also partnering with leaders and businesses to do the same.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that's significant. I think it's significant that for both of us who have experienced significant wounding and also done wounding of our own, but that is something that we're still willing to fight for because we believe that strongly. And for our leaders, our listeners, I do want to point something out. Eric cannot properly say the word wolf. You're not crazy. So he said it. I let it slide a couple times, but now I know you're listening and you're probably going, why does he keep saying wolf? It's just because that's how he says the word wolf.
You know what? Tomato, tomato, Don. Tomato, tomato. Tomato, tomato. All right. Just a few thoughts, application points for our listeners. My hope, our hope is that you have felt provoked, you have felt inspired, you feel maybe freshly envisioned to fight for these kinds of partnerships in your life, maybe just in a deeper way. A few things for us as leaders that would do us well to reflect on as we think about our teams, as we think about our significant others, our children, as we think about our friends, as we think about our extended family, to be asking this simple question: am I playing my part? Am I doing my part to build that bridge of trust toward that other individual? Am I communicating to them in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, and valued? Am I promoting a fail forward mentality? In other words, am I creating an environment of safety and security where people don't feel like their identity and their value and their self-worth is rooted in whether, they achieve certain things?
Yeah.
Do we celebrate? Here's a powerful question. Do we celebrate the risks that lead to failure as much as those that lead to success? Let me say that one more time. Do we celebrate the risks? I'm not talking about stupid risk. I'm talking about like legitimate risks, healthy risks. Do we celebrate the risks that lead to failure as much as those that lead to success? Really powerful. Yeah. For our listeners, you guys know that lately we've been pausing towards the end of our episode to give you a moment to reflect and to ask this simple question: what's my one takeaway from today? If there's only one thing that you could take away with you from this podcast, put it in your pocket that will help you elevate your leadership. What would that be? Take a few moments of silence, consider what that is, write it down, send it to a friend, record it on your voice memo. Or push the fast forward button. If your team withdraws, plays it safe, or is struggling to perform well under pressure, remember, it may not be about talent or skill. It may not be about effort or commitment. It might be about a lack of trust in the culture. Leadership at higher levels of complexity always requires carrying more weight. And the question is whether the trust inside your team can carry it with you.
That's right. And if you want to build that capacity intentionally, not just react surprised the next time you find yourself under pressure, Join us for our next Empower Masterclass. You can save your seat at mpwrcoaching.com/masterclass. The link is also in the show notes.
Next week, we'll shift the lens inward. That's right. And talk about what pressure can reveal inside of us as leaders and why the patterns that keep resurfacing aren't necessarily random. We love you guys. We're appreciative. We're grateful that you would share some time with us. And as always, we'll look forward to seeing you next time.